know it's kind of weird that you guys can't see me right now, but I really wanted the cake to be the focal point. Before we get started, let's just take a look at how much I love unicorns on this channel. I've made unicorn cookies that actually poop stars. I've made standing unicorn cakes. I've made unicorn milkshakes, unicorn name it, and I've unicorn made it. That was kind of cheesy. Today's unicorn cake could be unicorn or could just be a mad rainbow cake. It is rainbows, clouds, unicorns, and everything good in the world. I bring you the ultimate triple rainbow unicorn cake. If you're going to replicate this cake, either with or without unicorn at home, you're going to need a large cake board. I'm using a 16-inch cake board. I've got a batch of sugar cookie dough and a double batch of my vanilla frosting recipe. They're both from the Sweet Celebrations cookbook if you guys have that at home. Otherwise, I'll leave a link down below where you can check out both of those recipes. I've got some fondant in both pale blue and white, and I've got a bunch of different colored food colors. You can use paste, liquid, or gel here, and I've got all the colors of the rainbow. You're also going to need cake. So I'm using 8-inch cake layers, but I'm only baking about 1 inch of batter in the bottom of each, and I've colored them super bright colors of the rainbow. You can use your favorite vanilla cake recipe, or you can even cheat here and use store-bought, but you want to make sure that your colors are nice and vibrant. Now you want to roll out your cookie dough. Pop down a little bit of flour and use a rolling pin to roll it out, but not too thin here because it's got to be pretty strong. I'm going to use a big round bowl here instead of making a template. This one here is about a 10-inch bowl, but you can change the size of your rainbow and of your clouds depending on how many people you need to come to the party. Place the bowl face down onto your rolled cookie dough, and then I'm going to trace around the outside edge with a pizza cutter, but I'm going to make sure that I leave like a long straight line rather than finishing the rainbow off where it would otherwise be. Almost like a long leg on each of our rainbow sides. I'm just going to go by eye here and use that pizza cutter again just to create the inside loop of my rainbow, and then I'm just going to neaten off the base and kind of create almost like a very slightly pointed edge to help me drive my finished cookie into my cake. I find it easiest to slide a piece of parchment underneath and just shimmy the cookie on top of it. You want to bake your cookie for about 15 minutes, and normally I tell you to pull it out when it just starts to brown around the edges, but for this one, because I want to make sure that it's definitely baked, leave it in for an extra minute or so and watch it so that you can see when it gets just slightly darker brown around the edges. When your cookie's browned, pull it out and let it cool completely, and then I'm going to use literally anything sticky here, you guys. You can use something like honey, you can use corn syrup or glucose. I've got a little bit of caramel topping, so I'm going to use that because it's delicious. I'm going to roll out some white fondant really nice and thin, and then I'm really just roughly shaping it with my hands so that it kind of resembles a bit of a horseshoe shape. I'm going to drape it over the top of my cookie, and that caramel syrup is going to help it all to stick in place. Tuck it all the way around the edges so that it kind of hugs the outside of the cookie, and then I'm going to use a pizza cutter just to come around the outside edges and cut off really nice and close to the base of my large rainbow cookie. With your fondant in place, we're going to make basically an edible paint. So take a little bit of your food coloring. I'm using a paste here, so about 1/4 teaspoon, with a few drops of either vodka or clear lemon extract. This is going to help your paint to dry really quickly, and if you don't use something like the vodka or the lemon extract, your paint's going to stay wet for days, and it's not going to be pleasant at all to handle. The vodka evaporates, and that actually helps your paint to dry much, much faster. I've got quite a wide, flat paintbrush, and this is actually the perfect size for rainbow-sized stripes, but I'm going to start with my red, and I'm going to basically let the paintbrush do a lot of the work in coming around the outside edge of my rainbow and painting in my red line. Repeat this with all of the colors of your rainbow. You do have the option here to do something like a sanding sugar, like I did for my Rainbow Skittles illusion cake a little while ago. Or of course you could color individual balls of fondant in all of these different colors, roll them out in strips and then place them over the cookie, but that's a far more time-consuming option than just painting them. The downside of painting them like this is that that paint will stay wet, which makes it a little bit harder to handle. So I recommend doing this step either the day before or at least a few hours before you want to put your finished cake together. Doing it now makes sense because we've still got stacking and fondant covering and all sorts to do. You want to cut away any caramelization from either the top or the bottom of your cake layers, but you can leave the sides intact at the moment. Get them as level as possible, and I always like to work on chilled cake here, so you can either put them in the freezer for an hour or in the fridge for a couple of hours. It just makes it so much easier to cut them and it makes them less crumbly. Once you've got all of your cakes looking nice and vibrant and colourful, I'm going to use a cake leveler on the lowest setting to give myself quite thin layers of cake here because I don't want a massively tall cake. Each of my cake layers is only about 1/2 inch tall, but the cake leveler makes sure that every single one of those layers is perfectly the same. To keep your cake layers from getting crumbs all over each other, I like to place them on a plate with a piece of parchment in between each of your colours and stack them up. That way you can keep them chilled, they're easy to move around, and you don't kind of mess your yellows with your greens or your blues with your purples. I'm putting down a piece of parchment because I want this whole cake to be pretty easy to move around, but it is going to mean it's a little more slippery on your cake board or your cake turntable, so just balance it as you spread a really thin layer of buttercream frosting in between each of your colours. Repeat that with each of your cake layers, adding just a thin layer of frosting in between. And again, working with chilled cakes here just helps to stop all those crumbs getting picked up and makes these thin layers of cake a lot easier to work with. Once your cake's completely stacked and your whole rainbow of colours is in place, you're going to cut it in half, right down the middle. I know it seems weird to do this to a perfectly good cake. Support the cake using your whole hand, and then you want to take one half and place it rainbow side down or flat side down onto a cake board, and do the same with your other half. You can leave the parchment underneath if you like. Using a serrated edge knife here, I'm going to trim away the very outside edges, and now you can start to see all those beautiful colours peeking out of behind those caramelized side walls of vanilla cake. Once you've got those edges all trimmed off, you should be able to see amazing, super bright, vibrant stripes of color. Using my serrated edge knife again, I'm just gonna make like a V incision, sort of to the right-hand side of the top of my rainbow, and then again, right down the base of the rainbow. And then turn it around and repeat on the other side. So you have a V on the left and a V on the right-hand side of the top of your rainbow, and you've kind of just curved off those bottom edges a little bit. This is going to help us start to form the cloud-like shape, and you get to eat the scraps. I know it's not looking quite cloud-like just yet, so you need to take some buttercream frosting, and I'm going to use an offset spatula just to push it sort of in and all around those V shapes and all over your rainbow cake. This is going to trap any crumbs, so make sure it's just a really nice thin coat, then we get a really beautiful white coat on the outside once this thin coat sets. Make sure you've got your buttercream all the way into all the little crevices and corners of those little V's that you cut out, and your cake is completely covered, and then pop it off into the fridge for about 15-20 minutes so that first coat of frosting can firm up. Repeat that with both sides of your rainbow. You basically need to do these steps twice so that you end up with two similar clouds. Once that first layer of frosting set, apply a generous second layer of frosting all over the outside of your rainbow cloud. And then just use the back of the offset spatula to kind of scrape it so that you round off all of the edges around those V's and also round off the sides. It should be starting to kind of look like three little mounds, almost like a cloud, but not quite. I'm using white fondant to make my clouds perfectly white, but also to create kind of the bubbly texture of a cloud. So sprinkle down a little bit of powdered sugar or cornstarch and roll out your fondant nice and thin. Not super thin here, about 1/8 of an inch. Roll a bigger piece than you think you're going to need because you definitely don't want to come up short, and then lay it over the top of your buttercream covered rainbow cloud cake. I'm pressing in all the way around the bottom edges of my cloud and making sure that I've gone right into the V with my fondant, and then I'm going to use a pizza cutter because I find it gives me the best cut to just kind of wheel around the bottom edge relatively close to the base of the cloud. Don't worry if you don't get right into the base of the cloud. I always find it's better to leave a little bit of extra fondant, and then I'm going to use that same pizza cutter just to kind of push some of that fondant underneath. This is going to help to round off the base edge of our cloud as well as kind of seal everything in. The frosting, the rainbow cake, and all of that deliciousness inside. To finish it off, I'm actually just going to run my fingers around some of those little crevices and kind of follow some of the natural lines of the fondant to create those big kind of separated cumulus cloud type shapes. Pop that one off to the side and repeat all of that with cloud number 2. I don't ever like just a plain white or silver or gold board peeking out from under my cake, and I want this to kind of look like the sky. So I'm gonna cover my board in the light blue fondant. I'm gonna roll that out really thin because I don't like to waste too much fondant when I'm only using it to cover a board. And then I kind of like to trim around the edges by using the side of my knife to just rub through the fondant. Rather than cutting it off and giving you a jagged edge, rubbing through it like this makes it a nice, neat edge and gives it a really nice kind of an angle. This part is the second most nerve-wracking part of this cake. We're gonna transfer the two clouds onto that big board. I've actually got like a big cake mover. If you don't have one of these, think about sliding something underneath to help you move your cake, like a cake server or even a piece of relatively stiff cardboard. I'm gonna let both of my clouds hang just ever so slightly off the corner of my cake board, only like a ½ inch, because it kind of makes it look like my clouds are a little bit suspended in air. Here you need to measure the inside of your rainbow, and you need to place your clouds the same distance apart as whatever the width of the inside of your rainbow is. Now it's time for the rainbow cookie. I'm gonna measure my rainbow to make sure that I cut enough of a guide hole, but close enough is good enough. My rainbow is like 3½ inches, so I just wanna like estimate that that's gonna bring me to about here. And then using a nice sharp knife right in the center, I'm gonna cut a guide hole. Straight down, cut firm. I don't want my rainbow to be on an angle, so I'm just gonna kind of guesstimate middle and slice again. This could be the rainbowest of all rainbow cakes we've ever made here. I'm gonna be very careful to support it pretty evenly. Cookie on the back, rainbow on the front. I'm gonna line it up with my two guide holes and very gently pushing evenly, I'm gonna push it down. Be really careful here, you guys. One side at a time. Can you imagine if the cookie broke? I would die. And I'm just gonna press my little bits of fondant back together so that my rainbow is sealed into its clouds. The final finishing touch is our little unicorn. It's adorable. I'm in love with this cake. It turned out so stinking cute, but I feel like we've got to cut it to really know what's going on here. I think we do. Oh my God. Now this is a rainbow cake that I can't wait to eat. Of course I love the cookie, I love the unicorn, I love the rainbows, but the best thing about this cake is if you're having a smaller event, you can literally serve one cloud, save the other cloud for tomorrow. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's video. You may know me as being pretty well known for rainbow cakes, rainbow desserts, unicorn themed sweets. So make sure you head over to the channel and check out some of my recent rainbow unicorn themed uploads. And as always guys, thanks very much for watching.